Hello and welcome to ESG Talk, your go-to source for insights and advice from leaders in environment, social, and governance. I'm your host, Mandi McReynolds. Today we'll be discussing the role of internal audit and the role it plays in providing assurance. With all opportunities and growth ESG brings to a company, it also introduces new risk. Remember, on the show, we talk a lot about how ESG is about the opportunities, the cost, and the risk. One of the most exciting and new parts of the role for environment, social, and governance, especially for chief sustainability officers and their team, is partnering with all different departments, which includes internal audit team, incorporating overall assurance responsibilities, managing the risk of their data and controls, and making informed decisions for their boards and investors that need this reliable, assured data that often the internal audit team provides partnership and key advice to the organization. You know, at Workiva, we're on our own journey towards verification and audit. And in full disclosure, one of my board buddies is Ruth. Ruth on our team is the head of internal audit. And we both have the honor and privilege because she works with our audit committee of the board, reports to the board in board meetings, and then I go to our board meetings and report to our nominating governance committee. So we both have had the chance to have partnerships through our engagement with the board. As we integrate ESG across our board charters, we also updated the internal audit side and the audit committee side to incorporate the audit committee overseeing our disclosures for ESG reporting, controls, and data verification. So let's talk about this important role that Ruth and her team plays. What are some things to consider as you head into an internal plan or pre-audit or verification? The benefits are, I see Ruth and her team as key advice to the company, key advice to the board. They can't get in the weeds and actually do the work, but they're able to really give us some guidance or some watch outs. And so I think having a partnership and somebody in finance that can really talk through those pieces with your team is really critical and important. That said, I think it's really important to recognize that if you don't have an ESG controllership and finance and your finance partner at the table, they need to be there too, because there will be parts of the data and the ESG strategy work that collides with finance. And so it's important that your finance partners who do the work with the ESG team are also at the table and brought along together with internal audit. Internal audit can answer questions too when you start thinking through what are potential risks that need to be managed with your data. What are some things that you might want to consider from a governance standpoint? So oftentimes people go into an internal audit and they think it's just about the number. It's not just about the number. In fact, our own internal audit and pre-audit work that we're doing covers our governance, our strategy, how we set our goals and KPIs, how we manage against those components, how we work together to identify risk, how we manage those risks across our ESG task force. So that pre-assurance, pre-audit, internal audit partnership really looks at the whole part of ESG, not just the data that shows up in our report. So I think number one is recognize this is a great colleague that you can ask questions to, but also the scope of work is much bigger. So then where do you go? What's a way to prepare for internal audit? One, it's organizing all of your disclosure, your data, your governance, and your strategy into what we call a digital audit book. So we actually pass this from our ESG platform at Workiva over to our audit team so that they could see where our different information was, where our documentation was for audit, when it came to all things like governance, when it came to all things like our strategy, when it came to setting up our materiality assessment. In fact, we shared with them our over 80 plus pages of how we came to ESG materiality. I'd like to put a little special note for those who are preparing for CSRD. Very critical if you're going to face double materiality to have your internal audit team review your materiality documentation. Your digital audit book can help you get there. As a team, we created a checklist that we worked between the two teams to identify what are the documentations that need to go in our digital audit book. And finally, as we worked together, we identified who would be our first step for verification, who would be a firm post pre-audit that we would like to bring in to really help guide and begin our assurance journey. And so we work together to identify that firm. We work together in the RFP for that firm. And then after pre-audit, we'll go into verification. Now, we did not choose to verify all of our ESG data. In fact, that's a best practice both around the globe, wherever you may be. You're starting to see ESG data reports that checkbox the ones that have been through verification, assurance, or audit, and those that are on a journey. And so I encourage teams as they go through this journey, really get involved with your internal audit team, become buddies, become board buddies like Ruth and I are, work together on a digital audit platform that you can share information back and forth between the two teams. And finally, remember to start small and scale together. Of course, there's no audit process without challenges and lack of clarity, but I think it's important as you come together, you're both learning a new skill. Some people it might be their first audit from an ESG side. You're starting to learn that skill. For some of the audit team, it may be their first time that they're working with non-traditional financial data. So have grace, be open about the challenges that each team might be facing together. And ultimately, remember, you're doing this for board confidence. You're doing this for investor grade decision making. And you're doing this because it allows that trust and transparency for the world to see having your data and your information on a pathway towards assurance. So those are the key takeaways as you work together. Thanks so much for allowing me to share a little bit about our own audit journey here at Workiva. If you want to look at other episodes like ESG Talk, it was brought to you by Workiva, the world's unifying platform for financial reporting, ESG, audit, and risk. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on the Apple Podcast, subscribe to future episodes on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. We value your feedback and you help us shape the next show and the next chat. So we'll talk real soon.